There's a sentence buried inside a single Fox Business interview this week that I had to play back twice to make sure I'd heard it right. The CEO of Ripple, Brad Garlinghouse, casually mentioned that as part of finally ending Ripple's war with the SEC, $50 million is going to the US government, and that he's even floated paying part of it in XRP. Do the math on that. And the same government whose agency spent 4.5 years suing Ripple could end up quietly holding around 25 million XRP. Let that sink in for a second. The very institution that hunted Ripple could end up holding a piece of it, and that's just the opening. In the next few minutes, I'll show you how a US XRP ETF that nobody was watching just had a record-breaking launch. The billion-dollar move Ripple just made that they admit would have been impossible a year ago, and the one number plastered across thumbnails all over YouTube that is completely made up. And because this channel is called Verified, I'm going to tell you exactly what's confirmed and what is still just talk. Let's get into it. One honest note before we go further. Everything here is research and perspective to help you understand the story, not financial advice. I'm not here to tell you what to buy, sell, or hold. You know your own situation better than anyone, so take what's useful and leave the rest. To understand why this week is such a turning point, you have to go back to one date, December 22nd, 2020. That's the day the SEC sued Ripple and kicked off a battle that dragged on for roughly 4.5 years. For most of that time, this lawsuit was the shadow hanging over XRP. It's why exchanges delisted it, why big institutions kept their distance, and why the price so often felt stuck while the rest of the market moved. And now that shadow is finally breaking apart. In the interview, Garlinghouse explained that Ripple has reached an agreement with the SEC staff to dismiss the case and move on. Now let me be precise, because this is exactly where the hype channels overstate things. The staff reaches an agreement, then makes a recommendation, and then the full commission still has to vote. So the very last box isn't checked until that vote actually happens. But the direction is unmistakable. After 4.5 years, both sides are walking away. And here's the detail that genuinely surprised me. Ripple had set aside roughly $125 million in escrow for the worst-case fine. According to Garlinghouse, Ripple is getting most of that money back, including the interest it earned just sitting there. Think about that. You don't usually walk out of a 4-year lawsuit with your money and the interest on top of it. That's not how a company that lost behaves. That's how a company that believed it was right and simply outlasted the storm behaves. Now to that opening bombshell. As part of the resolution, Garlinghouse said the SEC ends up with $50 million and the US government ends up with $50 million. And then he added that they've talked about making that available in XRP. Run the simple math. $50 million at a price hovering around $2 a coin is roughly 25 million XRP. So the very government whose agency spent 4.5 years fighting Ripple could, in theory, end up holding 25 million XRP on its books. But here's where I have to be the honest voice in the room, because this is the kind of fact that gets blown completely out of proportion. 25 million XRP does not make the US government some giant whale. Ripple itself holds billions, and 25 million is a tiny drop next to that. And no, this is not going to pay off the national debt, no matter what anyone screams in a thumbnail. So why does it still matter? Because it's symbolic, and symbolism in markets is powerful. For years, the US government's entire relationship with XRP was a lawsuit. If that relationship turns into ownership, even a small amount, the message underneath is enormous. It quietly reframes XRP from the asset the government was fighting into an asset the government is comfortable holding. That shift in posture is the real story, not the size of the bag. And while everyone was distracted by the lawsuit, something else slipped through, almost unnoticed. A US-traded XRP ETF went live, and Garlinghouse called it the most successful launch day for any fund his company has ever done. What makes it wild is how quietly it happened. He admitted the filing had basically been ignored. They were the only ones who filed with that ticker. It slipped under the radar, and when it actually launched, it caught the market by surprise. The overlooked filing became a record-breaking debut. And this isn't a one-off. He pointed to around 11 different XRP ETF applications now lined up to come to market in the US. That's not luck. That's a crowd gathering at a door that stayed locked for a decade. And the reason an ETF matters so much is simple. It's a bridge. It lets everyday people, and far more importantly, big institutions, get exposure to XRP through a wrapper they already understand and trust. No wallets to set up, no seed phrases to lose, none of the usual friction. Every on-ramp like that is another lane for serious money to actually arrive. But the move that really tells you how confident Ripple is happened behind the scenes. In the middle of a chaotic news week, Ripple announced one of the largest acquisitions in the entire history of crypto, buying a company called Hidden Road for around $1.25 billion. Hidden Road is a prime broker. Think of it as the behind-the-scenes plumbing that the biggest players rely on to clear and settle their trades. The kind of operation that handles something on the order of $10 billion a day. By owning that plumbing, Ripple can open the door for massive institutions to step into this market in a way that feels safe and familiar to them. And here's the line that stuck with me. The interviewer asked whether he would have made this acquisition a year ago, and Garlinghouse didn't hesitate. Hard no. A year ago, he said, it would have made no sense, because the environment felt like a coordinated pressure campaign across multiple agencies, confusing IRS crypto rules and banks that effectively couldn't even custody crypto without being punished for it. Why pour over $1 billion into a market where you can't sign customers and the banks can't take part? The same move that was unthinkable 12 months ago is now a $1 billion bet placed with total conviction. And he was clear about his time frame. He's not betting on where things are in 6 months. He's betting on where they'll be in 3 years. That's not someone chasing this week's candle. That's someone building for the next decade. So with the lawsuit ending, an ETF live, and a $1 billion bet placed, you'd expect the CEO to throw out a giant price target. But when they asked him, he did something fascinating. This is a man perfectly willing to talk Bitcoin. He casually said Bitcoin reaching 175, even 200,000, isn't unreasonable, and the founder of Cardano was quoted predicting 250,000. Numbers were flying around freely, but the moment they asked him about XRP, he pulled back, basically saying he'll predict Bitcoin, but not XRP. It's too close to home. And I find that more telling than any number he could have given. The person with the most information and the most at stake chose silence over a flashy figure. Which brings me to that made-up number I promised to call out. You've seen it everywhere. You need 3,500 XRP. So let me say this plainly. Garlinghouse never said that. Nowhere in this interview, or anywhere credible, did he hand out a magic number of coins you need to hold. That number is invented to make you click and to make you anxious. There is no secret quota for the future. The right amount of XRP for you is the amount that fits your own life and your own risk. And anyone selling you an exact magic number is selling you anxiety dressed up as a deadline. Now that's everything happening in America. But across the Atlantic, something just as big is unfolding, and almost nobody is connecting these two stories. In Europe, a brand new set of rules called MiCA is quietly forcing Tether, the biggest stablecoin in the world, off of regulated exchanges. We're talking about something like $17.5 billion of USDT being pulled from compliant European venues. The reason is simple. Under MiCA, a dollar-pegged stablecoin has to be issued by an EU-authorized institution with strict reserve and disclosure rules, and Tether chose not to play by those rules. So one by one, major exchanges serving EU users, names like Coinbase Europe, Kraken, Crypto.com, and others, have been delisting or phasing out USDT. And when you rip that much liquidity out of a market, something has to rush in to fill the gap. This is exactly the lane Ripple has been quietly building toward. RLUSD, Ripple's own stablecoin, was designed from the start to fit these regulations, and Ripple has been securing the European licensing to back it up. But here's the honest part, the part that matters for a channel called Verified. RLUSD is not yet fully authorized in Europe. As of right now, it isn't on the official EU register, which means regulated European exchanges can't offer it to retail customers just yet. And in the short term, other compliant stablecoins like USDC may actually capture more of that gap first. So this is an opening, not a victory lap. But the direction is everything. The same story is playing out in the US, where new rules under the Genius Act are pushing stablecoin issuers toward bank-level compliance. The exact regulated model RLUSD was built for, and the exact model Tether's current structure doesn't fit. And the demand is already showing up in the numbers. RLUSD has grown around 62% in the last 30 days to roughly $770 million, and that's just on the XRP ledger. Something real is moving under the surface that most people aren't talking about yet. So let's bring it all together. On one side of the Atlantic, a 4.5-year lawsuit is collapsing. Ripple is getting its money back with interest. The institution that once sued it may end up holding XRP, an ignored ETF just broke records. And Ripple placed a $1 billion bet it called impossible a year ago. On the other side, the rules are pushing out the biggest non-compliant stablecoin and clearing a lane for the regulated players Ripple spent years preparing to be. Different continents, same pattern. The compliant, regulated, infrastructure-first approach is winning, and XRP sits right in the middle of it. That's the real signal. Not a magic number of coins, not a national debt fantasy. The machine being built, piece by piece. Forget the finish line someone else invented for you, and watch the foundation change instead. One quick reminder before I wrap up. This video is for educational purposes only and is not financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor. Crypto is volatile and risky, and you should always do your own research before making any decision. My only job here is to give you the real picture, the confirmed facts, and the honest unknowns, so you can think clearly for yourself. If this gave you the clear, honest version you were looking for, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. And tell me in the comments, do you think the US government actually ends up holding XRP? Just yes or no. I read every single one. Take care, stay sharp, and I'll see you in the next one.